I'm not gonna fucking... I already grabbed my shit.
Hello and welcome to the Graveyard Media Podcast, episode 72 for the third time.
Fuck, you said Graveyard Media Podcast. We have to do it all over again.
Oh my god, cut!
For the week of December 31st, 2018, I'm your host, Saine Grey. With me is Dalsson.
I'm here. Still here.
And Thel.
Hi, we're all here.
We're so sorry we started 3 times and fucked up 2 of them, but here we go.
It's been a fucking crazy week. I haven't even gotten to take down my Christmas decorations. You gotta give us some leeway.
Your Christmas decoration.
There's a skull on there. That's technically another one.
That's
and the skull
okay,
has a top hat. That's 3.
That's one.
That's
Christmas
part of
decoration.
the same wreath, Thel.
No. Look, it's a Christmas decoration, and the skull is a decoration.
And the hat is a decoration.
Yes.
Like
you disgust me, Thel.
Anyway,
the price tag is a decoration. Yeah.
Oh fuck, dude, is the price tag still on there?
Yes.
Shit. Well, that price tag is completely wrong because I bought this bitch for $1.
Wow.
Hell yeah.
Oh, that's a good use of $1. So this week we're gonna do something slightly different, and instead of talking about games and news, instead we're going to talk about our favorite games and movies that we've checked out this year that are not in our top 10 list because we have other videos coming out for that stuff.
Yeah,
right.
But
I really want to hear Thel's horrible vision of the future. He tried to tell us 3 times.
All right, so I had a horrible vision of the future, and I'll go through it quick. So one day, not long from now, probably, the Call of Duty series is going to stop making a game every year. It's going to die out.
Okay, I don't see where this is going.
When that happens, game journalists will probably refer to it as an end of an era and a tragedy.
People already do that when, like, the latest one came out and it sold like shit.
People already do that when the next Call of Duty game is announced.
And then the new one came out.
You know, that's okay.
And then the new one came out and they were like, it's the beginning of an era of good Call of Duties again.
Dios mío.
Okay.
Well, let's get this shit on. Let's talk about good things that we liked this year.
Yeah, good
Who
things.
wants to fucking start?
All right, well, Fallout 76.
Yeah, let us start with Fallout 76. How about that?
All right, yeah, sure, that's fine.
So, this is a game that almost made our top 10 list. Surprisingly
There was a lot of
not.
deliberation about this.
And when we say almost, we mean we were going to put it in until today.
Yeah, we decided to cut it today.
5 minutes ago. Dead ass, yeah.
So, despite all of the hatred for it,
yeah,
we actually liked it quite a bit.
Saine and I actually liked it quite a bit.
Oh yeah, that's true. I think Thel didn't hate it. He was just very indifferent.
Yeah, I felt like I really like survival games. I feel like I've been thinking about this, and I feel like the thing is, like, I actually kind of do like survival games. And you guys like actively don't. Yeah, and that's the thing. It felt like,
well, I would almost say that, except for Dalsson plays a lot of survival games and enjoys them, so I don't know.
Yeah.
It has to be a certain kind. It has to be something like Subnautica, where it's not like your goal is to get food, where it's like your goal is to do something that is a tangible goal, like rescue your son or find a way off the planet out of the forest or Subnautica, instead of your goal just being build a base and survive. That's boring. It gets like you build a base and then what do you do?
But I feel like Fallout 76 does check that box, but
yeah. Well, the thing about it is like, one of the things that I really like about, and a lot of people who do like survival games really like about them, is the sort of rags to riches thing. Like, going into Fallout 76, I sort of thought it would take me like a little bit to work up to getting a gun, like maybe an hour or so. I got a gun within like the first 5 minutes.
Yeah,
but it's one of the shittiest guns in the game. It's a terrible gun.
No, first off, it's not a survival game like that. It's Fallout. They didn't want to make a DayZ clone. They wanted to make Fallout.
Yeah, and then they kind of didn't do that because it's like you don't really have that much of an impact on the story. You know what I'm saying? your character necessarily.
I mean, not necessarily early on, but once you find out everything that's going on, the only reason you're launching nukes all over the place is to stop the scorched plague from coming out. Like, you're still doing stuff. You're not affecting the characters that are in the story because they're all dead or gone.
Except for the ones that aren't.
Yeah, except and all of the robot NPCs.
Yeah.
There are a few that talk to you on intercoms and things, but
you're kind of like affecting the world, because assume for a minute that this is canon, which it may or may not wind up being stated as canon later on.
I assume it won't be, but who knows?
Yeah, what you're doing is essentially re-nuking the entirety of West Virginia so that this scorched plague doesn't come out of the state and, turn everybody into zombies.
If anything, you're the only one who affects the world in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can kind of get that, Thel, the rags to riches thing, but I do think there is some of that. You just don't... Like, a gun isn't a particularly high thing, a high bar, but like some of the guns that you get really early on are garbage. They're so bad that I didn't even use them then, you know?
Yeah, and another thing is, like, with survival elements, the big thing that you guys don't like about it is the fact that, like, hunger and thirst and stuff are, like, kind of big problems in other survival games. Like, they are things you have to watch out for, and like diseases and stuff. And in this game, I just never gave a shit, except about hunger and thirst, but only because it kept me from running fast.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you know that it comes with the rags and riches things. It's like at some point you don't have to worry about that anymore, and in this game, you just sort of never really do.
I don't think that's really true, because like, water is a problem early on. Eventually, you get to the point where it's not, but
you have like a water purifier.
But water is a little difficult initially to get non-radiated water, and diseases are actually really common in that game, like way more than in normal Fallout.
Really common. But that was the thing. That was running around with bone worms and blood worms, and I didn't.
Yeah, but you're like level 10. Losing 2 strength at level 10 when you don't have anything that really works off strength is totally different from losing 2 strength when you have 6 times 60% extra board damage per strength. Like, then
and also
20% of your damage.
And also, like, you might have just gotten lucky with the ones that you happen to get, because I got one that drained agility, and that sucks. So I don't know, like,
but on the flip side of the disease system, they also have the mutation system, which I think is probably the best thing that Fallout 76 added to the franchise, if that makes sense. Like, those mutations can get really fun. Like, you can jump higher, so it changes the way you move around, or your unarmed damage goes up because you've grown claws, stuff like that.
One of my favorite things about Fallout 76 in general, and actually this is similar to the whole rags to riches things, even, when you start off, you find, like, hunting rifles that are, like, kind of crappy rifles. But over time, as you scrap them, you unlock more and more parts for it. And so you start out with this really kind of shitty, like, ranged weapon, and it eventually is basically a sniper rifle. Or literally a sniper rifle, depending on what you have equipped to it. So I think it's really cool to have, like, every hunting rifle you come across actually matter to some extent. And that's something that I really hope that they keep in other Fallouts, even if they scrap the rest of the mechanics. So I think probably
they should
go ahead.
Sorry. One thing I think they should do away with, going on that, like, building off that point, is your weapons do have a level tied to them, which affects their max, like, their damage, essentially. So if you spend a lot of time upgrading this level 5 hunting rifle, and you kitted the shit out of it, you're going to find a level 21, and then it's like, oh, well, this one's flat out better with no upgrades. And it's like, that feels kind of shitty.
Well, I feel like that's a constraint of the system they used.
Yeah, exactly.
But even then, I don't think... Like, the level differences seemed pretty negligible to me. I never really... Like, I didn't play quite as much as you, but I never got to the point where I found ones that were higher level but didn't feel like they were significantly better. And also they came with their own mods on them to start with, so it was easier to get to the same point anyway.
It's true.
So, I don't know. One of the things that I think the reason why this Fallout is so divisive is because they did add a lot of good things to the system and the game, but it's kind of wrapped up around interesting choices that people may or may not have liked. So, like, I personally really liked environmental storytelling, but I was hearing a ton of people saying they hate it and they think it's dumb, and it's kind of a meme in the Fallout series with like, oh, there's a skeleton holding a gun. I wonder what story happened here. So I mean, I've heard like,
oh, whatever. That's bullshit. You can't say it's a meme in Fallout games. You can't say like, oh, they just put this there for no reason, when like New Vegas had more of that than any other Fallout game before this one, and the only reason this one has more of it is because there is no other storytelling.
Well, you say that, but I still run in
storytelling. That's the thing. There's a ton of direct storytelling, like with the computers and the audio logs.
But I mean, I still run into people who say Fallout 3 was their favorite Fallout story. So, I think this is just a thing that comes down to personal taste, and I think it just turns out that the majority of people don't like environmental storytelling as much as they like actual storytelling. So I don't know. It's weird.
I think the problem that they're running into is that the environmental storytelling is like just that. It's not like it's not that they don't like environmental storytelling. It's that they don't like that kind of environmental storytelling that's kind of like loose and easy. You know what I'm saying? It's just a guy with a gun. Like if you look at something like Yume Nikki, which is almost what's the word I'm looking for? The story is almost entirely up to interpretation. It's this giant world that shows you the inside of her head and the inside of her dreams. There are multiple symbols for things, but
see, that's the thing.
The guy died.
That's the thing. I still don't. Well, there is a lot more than just the guy died. That's like the generic one that people point to, but there is more than that for sure. But what I kind of like, and that's what really confuses me about that whole argument, because I'll hear people who like Dark Souls' storytelling so much, and that game's storytelling is done all through item descriptions, basically. So I don't understand how people can hold Dark Souls up as a great storyteller and then say that Fallout 76 is bad at it. Like, could be because...
Oh, yeah, but the story is, again, also, like, for instance, I talked about this in the Hollow Knight video. A lot of Dark Souls storytelling is, like, verbally through the item descriptions, but visually it's throughout the entire world, right? You're going through all of these places and seeing what essentially happened to them, you know?
But you do the same thing in Fallout. So I don't like in Fallout 76 you do that. Yeah, so I don't understand how that's any different.
Let me give an example of a quest I actually did. There was this kid who was missing. I at the fun house or something. It sounded like he got kidnapped from an audio log, so I had to go all over the world looking for him. Well, I finally find that it turned out that they had holed up in like a sugar factory or something. The guy who kidnapped him took him and all this, and eventually I'm just kind of going through this sugar factory and I'm reading like notes that like a diary that the kid left behind, and eventually I come across a like a big fucking like bear trap and all these traps I have to disarm, right? So I get through all that, and then I find another note later on that's like not even really near these traps, but in like a living area, and the kid's like, oh yeah, Uncle Kidnapper Man really starting to get mean. He's not giving me as many video games anymore, so I think I'm gonna set up a trap that I learned about in his Boy Scout handbook he gave me, and try and get him so I can get away, you know? And it's like the traps there obviously didn't get him because they were armed, so you know, little things like that, and it is all over. You just have to look for it.
Yeah,
and I don't think people want to look for it. They just want to.
I think certain people just want to be spoon-fed it, And like maybe you're not that way, Thel. Maybe you do enjoy both, but I know that like this really opened my eyes to just how many people really just want the story spoon-fed to them, like,
Right.
honestly.
Because let's be honest, that information you're saying that about why people don't like it is information that you've heard third hand.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, yeah, that is true. And I'm mostly trying to like point out their arguments. Like again, the reason I didn't
devil's
like
advocate.
it was,
Yeah, you had a totally different reason.
Yeah, because I played and I thought it was like a watered down version of two different games.
Yeah, you just thought it was kind of boring. I get
Yeah.
that.
I find my biggest issue with it is it's like the multiplayer aspect, while fun, really conflicts with the only storytelling aspect. Like, you have to listen to audio logs and read notes and read terminals to find out anything about the story. But that stuff is hard to do while you're also playing with someone else. So
yeah, especially if you're going with randos. Like sometimes your friends might both want to read it, but if you're going with randos, you know nobody's gonna read that shit.
Well, even when I was playing with Dalsson, both of us do like that stuff, but it's like he's, you know, fucking around with something else while I'm trying to read this terminal, and then suddenly like it's just I'm trying to hurry up and through the terminal as fast as possible, and he's just not engaging with it at all, or vice versa, like, because some stories might be more interesting than others. So I don't know, like, when people talk about the story, it really confuses me, because I have already found things that will be super memorable to me in that game, and I've barely played it like 10-15 hours. So I don't know, it's just very strange to me. We don't want to talk about the like just Fallout the whole time, so why don't we switch to a different game? Why don't you talk about The Witcher, though?
I played the whole entire Witcher series, except I haven't finished Witcher 3. So yeah, oh shit, I guess I should just start with the first one. The first one is I feel like the best way to describe it is a RPG, a 3D RPG that was trying to be a CRPG that was made in 2006. I feel like that's a pretty good description. This was around the time when people looked at Oblivion and were like, God damn, there sure is polish in this game.
You don't fucking talk shit about Oblivion. Oblivion was amazing.
Oh yeah, Oblivion
still holds up, even if it looks bad.
Oh yeah, no, don't get me wrong. Oblivion's still pretty great. But like, it's like, especially like in comparison to other games coming out at the time, Oblivion was fucking great, because like, I play games like games like The Witcher, and specifically I always like to bring up Vampire the Masquerade, because there's some problems with these games. They're rough around the edges, but it's like these games are rough around the edges, but I'm 100% willing to finish them because the stories are just that good. Like this one, Witcher, the first Witcher, I talked like constantly on the podcast about chapter 2 and how it's just at the fucking worst. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. And the biggest problem with chapter 2 is it doesn't go fucking anywhere. It's just like you do all of this main story shit and it just doesn't fucking go anywhere. It turns out the guy that you were like working with to find out all of this stuff about the main bad guy was the main bad guy for a little while. And essentially you didn't find shit out. You fucking interviewed all these motherfuckers for more than half of my playtime in the game, and then it just turns out it was fucking nothing. It was Azure Javed the whole time. Let's move on to another fucking thing that happens. You get to chapter 3, and it's like, oh, thank God, I get to go around this other place that's much easier to fucking navigate, because I don't have to go from like, I don't have to walk around the goddamn church every time. And I do have to go back to the places in chapter 2, but I get a fucking fast travel, so it's cool. Right. Yeah. And then you get to like chapter 4, which is dead ass my favorite chapter.
Well, there's no reason to re-summarize the story again, because you've done this several times. But
essentially, what you're saying there is, if chapter 2 had a plot, it would have made the trudging through it like a plot that actually ended with something important. It would have been more tolerable to trudge.
Or if it was like a side plot or something, because that's one of the things I'm going to talk about The Witcher 3. But yeah, Witcher 1, in the end of the day, The Witcher 1 is really good and hit me with one hell of a twist that fucked me up. It was great. Witcher 2 fixed a lot of the rough around the edges, though it was still really janky. The combat system was so much better. Walking around felt much better, even though it didn't feel very it didn't feel like you were very free. It sort of gave you this open world, but there were only certain paths that you could walk on.
Right.
The story was really interesting. Didn't focus as much on Geralt and more about on the world and stuff. So there was like a ton of things I had to look up because it's like, what the fuck? Who is that? Was he in the Witcher? Oh, that guy was in the first Witcher. Who the fuck is this guy? Oh yeah, he was in the last chapter. Now I remember what the fuck is going. Now I remember who these people are. And it ended on a big ass cliffhanger that essentially hyped me up for The Witcher 3, which was really great because The Witcher 3 is dead ass the best out of all of them. That's why my lighting is so funky, is because this one isn't on. Right. Witcher 3 is essentially multiple Witcher games worth of Witcher. And I haven't even found Ciri yet, which is like the first third of the game.
I see.
Because of the side quests in like going back to the Bethesda open world games. In the Bethesda open world games, it's like, Lamau, fuck the main quest. I'm gonna fuck off and do all of this just miscellaneous bullshit.
Okay.
And in this game, it's essentially like what was the example I gave to like Appleton like last night? I was doing something. I sort of realized how why the fucking side quests in this game were so engaging. The quests were like, main quest, Winston Churchill has told you about one of his parliament members, might know where John Fucknose is. You can find him at the Drunken Fish. Fucknose may know something about your lost dog. Side quest, Winston Churchill has been leading an assault against a man named Adolf Hitler, who he believes is causing a genocide and invading countries. Learn more about Adolf Hitler and try to stop him. It's like, I could go find Ciri, but there's more important fucking things going on right now. I gotta assassinate like 13 leaders. I gotta fucking make sure that this goddamn election doesn't get destroyed by bears. There's a bunch of shit going on the side that it's like, I don't know if I have time to look for Ciri right now. She can fucking handle herself. I have this other shit I gotta deal with right now. Hold up, Yennefer. But yeah.
Right.
And all of the side quests are incredibly well written. They're great to go through. It leaves you with a like someone asked in the chat, like do the quests give you good loot? The quests never give you loot. They give you experience and money. However, all of the good loot you can find is essentially littered around and like rewards for exploring, which is nice.
Okay.
But yeah, there are like two generally like sort of large maps. There's the Skellige Islands and there's Velen and the fucking city. And I went to the city because I expected, oh, there's probably going to be a couple of side quests there. And like that took up half of the playtime, all of the shit going on in the city with like the fucking mages getting burned at the stake and trying to help them do that. It's there's a lot of shit going on in The Witcher 3, and it's a wonderful way to end off the series. It'll keep you going. Sometimes I can only go for an hour and just finish off one of the side quests. Sometimes I can go through an entire like side quest tree for like a whole story. It's wonderful. The Witcher series as a whole is very, very good, and I would recommend it, just like everyone else.
All right, then.
So yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
All right.
I really should play it.
Yeah. If you can't stand like a lot of the stuff in The Witcher 1, the amount of rough around the edges, I can understand that. Just skip to The Witcher 2.
Right.
All right. Dalsson, why don't you talk about something for once?
Okay.
We'll give you The Forest.
There.
Gee, thanks. Okay. So, The Forest is something that I've actually put quite a substantial amount of time into, and it kind of already goes back to what we were saying about Fallout 76, is that the reason I like The Forest is because I have a tangible goal, right? So, first of all, it's a survival game, and I normally hate those. But The Forest has a story where you crash land on an island in a plane. Crash land. It's an accident, supposedly. Yeah. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I mean, the plane does explode.
It's actually inhabited by cannibals, and you were on the plane with your son, so you have to find him. So the reason that you're going around and doing everything, you explore these caves not for the sake of getting better gear to upgrade your ability to survive, but you explore these caves with the intention of finding your son. Whereas in like, I don't know, okay, let's say Minecraft, the most basic bitch one. You have no reason to go into those caves other than diamonds are down there and you want them, right? Whereas
well, there is
like
the getting to the Nether and the Ender Dragon and stuff. Those were, added probably after we all played it, but
Oh yeah, but you certainly aren't told anything about that. It's not like you've come to this land in search of the Ender Pearls so that you may finally defeat the Ender Dragon and end the plague that's sweeping across the land. It's not like that. It's just like you happen to discover Enderman, and if you looked on the wiki, you would know that, and that's dumb, and that's how a lot of survival games are. Whereas in this one, all of your recipes are kind of like there for you when you discover what you need to craft them. That's a big help. You don't have to look up shit on the wiki for 12 hours.
You know what? The thing I do like about survival games is the exploration aspects of it.
Exactly.
That's kind of why I like things like Minecraft. That's why I liked things like, I don't know, even Fallout 76. Like, so the quality of the exploration part of the game is what keeps me interested, and the survival aspect of the game is what like tears at that. So that's why it's like a game like 7 Days to Die is really difficult for me to play, is because even though I do enjoy going to buildings and looking at places, the survival aspects were so oppressive that I felt like I was working so hard to deal with the survival aspects that I couldn't do what I actually wanted to do, which was go into random buildings and look for shit. So
right. Yeah, and that was kind of what you were saying about Fallout 76. You enjoyed scavenging for your survival stuff. You didn't want to have to force yourself to farm for it.
Exactly.
And that's what the forest, you kind of have to like hunt things, but even that's a little bit fun because you feel like you're actually like really being a hunter, right?
Right.
You make your bow and you like hit the deer, and then you gotta track it through the forest, and then you gotta get it again and stuff like that. So that's pretty nifty. But I think the exploration is where the forest really shines, especially when you're down in caves. Like you've got like a lighter and a flashlight that'll flicker if it gets too low on batteries and stuff, maybe. So like it really fills you with this sense that you are in a dark fucking cave with some kind of horrible cannibals, which, by the way, the island is inhabited by cannibals. It's not really a spoiler because you'll see the heads on the sticks. So yeah, and the survival part doesn't really get in the way of exploring. It's I think that's what it really is how much does surviving prevent you from exploring, right?
Exactly.
Is it like a gate where you can't go past a certain distance from your base, or is it like a gate where the amount of time required just to survive keeps you from having time to do anything else? I think that's the big difference. It's a hard design decision, but I think the Forest and Subnautica both did it pretty well. And those are the only two that I think I've really found that have done it pretty well.
Fallout 76 is my favorite survival game because it's not much of a survival game.
Exactly.
and honestly, like, and that's what I was saying. I actually kind of do like survival aspects in games, and I think that's like, sort of like nothing killed me in Fallout 76. That's what I was talking about with the like diseases.
Well, you died more than I did.
I mean, yeah, I died more than I did, but I didn't fucking lose anything for it.
Yeah, but that's...
But you didn't play enough to get to the point where you cared about what you lost, because there is a certain point where it really sucks to lose glue and screws and steel and stuff, but you didn't play enough to, like, actually need any of that shit.
Yeah, there's more of a penalty when you die in... there's more of a penalty in 76 than when you die in any other Fallout game. Every other Fallout game...
No, what I'm talking about is, like, other survival games. Like, for instance, Don't Starve. If you fucking die and Don't Starve, it's bad.
Yeah, you lose the game.
Yeah,
of course it's bad.
That's not...
Yeah. Well,
I don't think like, that one's very equivalent, but...
But yeah, that's what I mean. Like, even in, like, Don't Starve Together, what you gotta do is you gotta fucking do some shit to get people back. And then, like, Because like in the beginning, like getting a disease.
When you die
I
and
think
don't start together, all you do is make your friends not want to play anymore.
I think Don't Starve 2 is a really bad example for this because anyone dying basically means the game is over. Unless you're like far enough that it
Unless you
actually far enough.
Resurrector.
Yeah, so I think that's a bad example. I think something like Minecraft maybe is a better example because you lose everything in Minecraft.
Yeah, and again, like the forest. I feel like some things in the forest like just can straight up kill you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Rather than like in Fallout 76 it being a bit of a hindrance.
When you die or when you're like fighting, you mean?
When you're like when you get like a disease.
Oh, okay. Yeah, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Well, but
yeah, I don't
like
I don't
hunger and thirst and stuff. They won't just fucking murder you.
Oh, they will.
They will if you don't have enough supplies. They will. You won't die from it, but if you can't run, then you'll die. So I don't know.
But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, about the forest, it was the first kind of game that I really enjoyed building a base in, because it wasn't like I crafted a bunch of logs together to put down a prefab wall, right? Like I had to actually like chop down a whole tree, drag the log back over to a palisade, and place the log in the palisade after picking it up.
To make a prefab cabin instead.
Yeah.
No, well, yes, but they had like prefab palisade, or they had non-prefab palisade walls that I spent a long time building.
Well, the way that the crafting materials actually went into a building was probably better than a lot of games, but
yeah, it seemed really cool because you could see the progress you were making on it, and you could.
That was one of the things I really liked about the forest.
Yeah,
I just really
it made it feel cool. It made it really time consuming though.
I just really don't care about building a base. Like that's never like that's why I have trouble with games even like RimWorld, because that's not something that super appeals to me, the actual like building stuff part. So like really that honestly the most I've ever done that is in Fallout, and mainly just as a convenient building that to house all my crafting benches. Like I don't that's never been something I really engage with, and funnily enough, Fallout has been the most successful at getting me to care about it, but not really because I care about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because it has an impact on what you're doing.
Exactly. So I don't know. I don't want to keep going back to Fallout, but it just happens to be easily comparable because they're both survival games, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Fallout 76 isn't a survival game, and that's where my big take, like,
yeah, I feel like it's
my big difference of take is on it with Thel is.
I feel like it's an action game with survival elements. It's not a survival game with action elements, you know?
Right.
Right.
Which I feel like most.
Whereas the forest definitely is.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Why don't we move on? We should probably go through these a little bit faster.
Maybe, yeah.
We'll talk about Vermintide. Because that's a game that multiple of us have played.
We've all played it.
All of us, yeah.
Together, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. It's like Left 4 Dead 2, but it's slightly better.
So let me start. When I was playing Vermintide for the first time, I looked at all those characters and I was like, yes, this dwarf is who I want to be. Mm-hmm. And I was. And it was awful because I had no idea how to play. I didn't understand the concept behind Vermintide where you have to, like, I don't know, like, I went into it thinking it was kind of like Left 4 Dead. So I wanted to use my ranged weapon primarily to pick them off, and then I would just try and use my melee weapon to like shove them back as much as I could. And then I ran out of ammo, and oh my god, we got eaten. It was just the worst. And finally, like over time, I got pretty darn decent at, you know, like using my weapons to push them away and kill them effectively at the same time, wading into hordes of enemies. And that's exactly what I wanted to do when I looked at that small little dwarf man and said, yes, I want to be in the middle of 1 million rats and kill all of them.
I feel like that game has some of the most satisfying and effective melee combat I've played in, like first-person melee combat I've ever played in a game.
It just feels so nice. Like every hit feels so impactful.
Because even games like Chivalry and other ones that are pretty good just don't feel it weighty, and they don't feel right, you know? It's way easier to do melee in third person, and especially games like Fallout and Oblivion and Elder Scrolls or whatever, they kind of are garbage at that.
You want to
melee
talk about
in particular?
At that, talk about Morrowind.
Yeah, right?
You had a hit chance when your sword went into their skull.
So, I mean, it's one thing when you're wading through hordes of enemies that die pretty easily. Not that all of the enemies in Vermintide do necessarily, but like, I don't know, it just feels good, whereas I feel like every other example of first-person melee combat just feels clunky, you know?
Yeah, it's much easier to get right in third person. Like, that's what people always point to in Dark Souls, is how the combat feels, but it's easier because you can see your whole character moving, and you see the impact of the strike from the way that your character moves, whereas all you can really discern in Vermintide is your weapon, and it still feels like you're ripping through a rat skull.
Ripping and or tearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels really good. Also, all of the it's also like really interesting with all of the weapons that it has. It has like a million different weapons, all of which sort of feel different. Like I found like a really happy medium with the flail, and like all of the characters all have like multiple different weapons and weapon combinations.
Yeah, that is one of the biggest things. Like every weapon, even ones that are really similar, or feel so different from each other.
Yeah.
Like it would have been really easy for them to put a long sword and a short sword and make them do slightly different damages, but instead one has a completely different moveset than the other, and it feels so good.
And a different range, and the amount of block that you can use with it. Like every single thing has like a bunch of unique stats and animations and movements, and even to the point where certain like two characters can use the same weapon and it will be completely different, because Human Man, who's a paladin of Sigmar, isn't going to have the same fighting style as an elf who speaks for the trees.
Yeah.
Like, okay, mayflies.
Yeah. See, the elf will like almost run in and like dance around and do these big sweeping AoE hits all around her, and the Sigmar man can just go in and like cleave somebody in half. It's like completely different, even though it's the same weapon.
Yeah.
It's really, really great feeling. So switching characters will just get you more time out of it because it's completely different playstyle.
Man, now that we've talked about it for 5 minutes,
I want to play
it.
it. Like, gee, that's how good it is. We've just talked about it. We haven't even really thought about it in like 6 months. But
this is a game that this is another game that almost made our top 10.
Yeah.
This one, like it's in our section of honorable mentions. Like we wanted to talk about it, but we'd ended up just not being able to.
Yeah.
Man, I love that game though. I want to go back and play it.
Yeah, it's really pretty damn
fun. Is For the King going to be on our list? Or should we talk about it? Okay.
Is it not?
I don't know. I thought we said we were going to go with a different last one. Maybe not. Let's talk about something else then. Why don't we talk about Prey? I think Dalsson and I played it this... No.
I played it last year.
Dalsson played it this year, and Thel and I played it last year.
Okay.
Yeah. Not that any of us got super far in it, but except for Dalsson, or except for Thel.
It's really interesting because just by having one simple little game mechanic that is a theme through the entire game, it creates a sense of paranoia. Now, don't get me wrong, the story and the environment does create a like add to that, but without the story and the environment, there would still always be that sense of paranoia because of the fact that the main enemy that you fight is something that can turn into literally anything.
Well, it makes stuff like walking through an office terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And like, so there was a point where I was like, oh, finally, a gun. Yes. And I reach out to pick up the gun, and it turns into a mimic and starts beating my ass. So I have to take out my wrench and panic, and then I see the other gun that's right next to it. So it's like, and from that moment going forward, I was like, I am never going to be safe.
Yeah, I wish I put more time into Prey. It's another one of those games that I enjoyed, but so much other stuff was happening and I never came back to it.
Yeah, I sort of fell off it really hard. I got to like a certain point in it and I was like, okay, that's enough. I've seen the game. I know what it is. I really liked the one of the things that I really liked about it was the all of the anti-gravity stuff, all of like the anti-gravity combat and stuff. I thought it was
I hate
really
those
really
segments.
great.
I like
Yeah, Dalsson,
anti-gravity
however,
combat.
hated those segments and thought they were horribly annoying.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, Prey feels like the best Resident Evil game that isn't Resident Evil.
Yeah. How so?
Well, discounting like 5 and 6 because those were a huge shift in the game or in the series anyway. If you compare it to like even 7 or like 2, it was a game about like going through an environment that was relatively normal or whatever, and as you kind of went on, you were always worried about something popping out at you and fucking you up, like in the same way that like you had a sense of paranoia ever since you tried to pick up a gun and it attacked you. There was a scene in Resident Evil 1 where you're walking through this long hallway and you feel like you're safe because there's like nothing in this room and there's never been anything in this room the whole time you've gone through it. And then fucking dogs jump through the window on either side of you and fuck you up. Like, and this was just...
That happens and you're like, oh god.
Yeah, so from then on, you never know, like, if I'm just walking through a room, is suddenly something going to change. So, I never, like, Prey makes me feel the same as when I'm playing a Resident Evil game, in a way that most other games don't. Right. Or you could even compare it to Resident Evil 4. Like, there was a lot of times where you're just walking through a building and suddenly enemies, you know? And it's like there was no indication that was going to happen, but then suddenly you're surrounded. So,
yeah. And that, and of course I made like a whole joke video, like dead ass my first video.
Yeah, it was your first video
about Prey, making fun of it because it was essentially sort of the same game as System Shock, which I don't actually have a problem with.
Yeah, that's what
part of
people
why I liked
wanted with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's I wasn't expecting just System Shock to when I was going into it, but I mean, shit, I don't mind games like System Shock. I like those. I'm glad that we have like RPGs.
Look,
that
we kind of needed another new game like that after BioShock turned away from what they did with BioShock 1 and 2 and changed itself to Infinite. Like,
yeah,
if they're not going to go back to the original formula, we kind of needed another System Shock like.
Well, a System Shock 4 is coming out.
Oh yeah, I did hear about that.
I haven't heard shit about it since, but it's apparently in the works.
Here you are, John Spaceman. I am Shodan. Let me teach you about your regenerating shields.
Let's move on.
I'm going to use them to kill you.
Why don't we talk about Pillars of Eternity?
All right. Okay. Has anyone else played any of it?
Oops, no? I played it.
Oh, God, you talk about it a little bit first, at least first impressions.
I played the first one.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Yeah, when it came out, probably.
I honestly don't remember it very much, so go ahead.
All right.
I remember enjoying it, and I thought the stat system was really, like, the attribute system was really good because it's the only game that I've ever played like it that actually all of the stats matter.
Yeah.
You gain something out of every stat. It's not just that you can't really min-max effectively. I mean, you can, but you lose something for it. It's like an actual choice. So
yeah. And also, what I really liked about it is like the super customizable way that the stats sort of work. What I ended up doing was min-maxing multiple characters in silly ways. I had the elf wizard man who was slightly who had a dwarf lady in his brain. What I ended up doing with him is I made him my lockpick man and my sneak dude, even though he was a magic man. I had like a bunch of different yeah, gameplay wise, it had a bunch of different really interesting things. I felt like the stealth could have worked a little bit better and wasn't super good, but it wasn't like heinous and hurt the game in any way. I felt like the stealth could have been better. I've seen it pulled off better in other games, like the first Divinity, for instance. Which Pillars of Eternity 2 fixed like all of like even the little problems that I had with
To
it.
be clear, the first Divinity Original Sin.
The first Divinity original sin, not the first
no.
Divinity video game.
Yeah.
I will say that Divinity has like a much better fucking combat system than this, but that's just because Divinity's combat system is fucking godly.
Yeah.
It's wonderful,
like,
and I love
Divinity probably has the best combat system in any CRPG, so
I think that is probably true.
Yeah.
But yeah, the story in this is one of the things what I was talking about is because we were playing through Divinity Original Sin 2, and I was playing through this like around the same time. One of the things that I said about this game is that it was a much darker CRPG. It's sort of there was a lot less levity just going around. It was much more focused on politics and how everything's fucked up and how the gods are lying to you.
Yeah. Divinity tries to actively be silly, where this game is very much like you walk into a town full of a giant tree with hanging corpses from it. So
yeah,
if that tells you anything about that kind of game, so
and that's one of the things. The second one essentially sort of throws that out the window and has a lot of levity in it. Like immediately, some of the first like with the dialogue options too, it's a lot less somber, and there's always a choice to just be kind of a jackass. Like you can always just be like, well, you're a fucking dickhead, and I don't like you. I'm not going to accept your quest. Fuck you. I'm gonna let you rot in this dungeon, bitch. Which is, it was kind of nice to have that choice. A lot of the jokes worked, which was great. I would have like counted that as a negative towards Divinity 2 if the jokes weren't funny, but they are. So hey, it's a positive. The stealth in Divinity 2 is much better. You get a boat that replaces the whole.
Wait, hold on. Expand upon that a little bit. How is it? What makes it so much better?
Okay, so in Divinity 1, what it was essentially you like snuck around, and it was really weird. I'm not even sure if there was like a thing that showed you like how visible you were or where other people were seeing you. It was essentially just like, based on your stealth roll, this man is near you, roll dice to not be heard. We're not going to give you much feedback on that. So to find traps, you have to be in stealth mode. This is what stealth mode is for. It is to find traps. It's not necessarily, you don't use stealth mode to sneak very much unless you want to get like a first hit and like get some combat off. But you aren't going to be like sneaking through the dungeon past the enemy. It's essentially stat buff, find traps. So you're going to be sneaking around everywhere, but not to sneak.
Yeah.
Whereas in Divinity 2, it's like, I'm going to sneak around everywhere so I don't run into that fucking enemy who's that much higher level than me. I'm just going to actually legitimately sneak because I can see his field of vision, and also I can find traps without having to press the sneak button, which is just nice. Thanks.
I just wish that they gave you direct experience for sneaking past people, because games like that always make it hard for me to want to ever sneak anyway.
And I think
go ahead.
I think the Divinity does a little bit. But yeah, in Divinity 1, there is a castle building sort of micromanagement sim. You gain like a bunch of like as you go throughout.
You mean Pillars of Eternity 1?
Yes, Pillars of Eternity 1. You go around getting money, and you can use the money to like not only buy a bunch of stuff, but you're gonna end up being overburdened by money, so you use it to build up your castle and make it prettier and nicer. And that essentially doesn't do very much except for like this one quest, but it's nice to go have like a base of operations that you can go back and like save at and re-get all of your stuff and sell things to that like looks a little bit nicer when you come home. And in Pillars of Eternity 2, they expanded on that, replacing your house with a boat that you actively use to get to places and has ship combat. So all of the crew and stuff that you put on the boat has a reason to sort of be there. And it's great. The boat combat though is done sort of through like a text thing where it's like you specifically like you end up in a combat thing, turn right, turn to aft, have him on my aft, fire cannons. You can fire cannons in this many turns, and it's like that, and that might turn people off, but I thought it was really fun, and I really liked it. I love the fact that they replaced the castle with the boat, and that the boat matters, and that you can go and buy upgrades from your boat, and it all feels like impactful within the game.
They probably could have made the boat or the castle matter more just by having it be attacked or something.
Yeah, there is like one quest where a man is like, "Hey, I am claiming this castle. You have to fight me on the field. Go and find specific armies to help you fight me. Or you can just level up and kill the shit out of all of my dudes on your own. It's up to you."
Right.
Why don't we move on?
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about Deltarune next?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Toby Fox, for giving us this demo. It's one like day, one like chapter, one like 3 to 6 hours, depending on how much time you want to take on it thing, by Toby Fox. It's new Undertale. All of the writing is wonderful. I love you, Toby Fox. I legitimately enjoy it.
Yeah.
It was a game that really sort of reignited everyone's, oh yeah, Undertale was actually really good, wasn't it? I spent all of this time sort of forgetting about the actual game of Undertale and being focused more on the fan base of Undertale that I completely forgot that, oh yeah, Toby Fox is really good at this shit, huh? I sure do like all of these characters. I'm exploring the city and meeting all these characters I found from the original Undertale, and gosh darn it sure is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That game was good. The reason why I didn't make... Well, it's kind of was just a demo, and it wasn't super long, so that's why we didn't even kind of consider it for our list.
If it had been like the full release of the game, it probably would have made our top 10 list, and probably will next year or the year after.
Or whenever it comes out.
Whenever it comes out, yeah.
Exactly.
But I think that the man has drummed up enough interest based on the views on my fucking videos that I think that he's got a pretty good thing going. And I'm excited. Yeah. I'm super excited. It essentially looks like what it's going to do is it's going to have like a day system, sort of like Night in the Woods, where you go around and talk to everyone every day, and then you do like some stuff in the underworld every day.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So Persona, then.
Yeah.
Essentially, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, exciting.
Is there any games on the list that you want to talk about before we move into movies?
I talked about X4 a little bit. Did I talk about like Dusk at all?
I don't know.
Because I really like Dusk.
Why don't you talk about Dusk?
Okay, I'll be really quick. What Dusk is it is a it's sort of a retro callback game. There's been like 1 billion of these made. It's like a retro Quake-like, Doom-like sort of thing. A big callback to the retro fucking first-person shooters of yore. And it's the best one. It's really, really good. It's fun as hell. All of the levels are really, really intricately designed. All of the enemy placement is really, really well thought out. There are a ton of traps. When you grab things, doors open up and enemies come and kill you. Everything has like a strict progression. There's a shit ton of bosses, which is my biggest problem with Quake 1, is that there's like 2 bosses in the whole game. This game has like multiple bosses per chapter. There's a huge variety of enemies that are fun to shoot with your fucking shotgun. Good game. It's also got that Lovecraftian thing going on, which is really nice. It's got reasons to sort of like we were talking about Prey. It's got a little bit of reasons to be afraid, but also reasons to just fucking murder shit. They're like enemies that go invisible, and you like have to look at the floor to fucking like see where they're coming from. You shoot them, and then a noise plays, and it like reveals them. And sometimes you shoot another enemy, and it like reveals it. Yeah.
I think we did talk about this game, and I kept on incorrectly comparing it to like Painkiller.
Right.
I don't think that Painkiller is a super incorrect thing. I feel like Painkiller is a pretty good comparison.
Okay, then Hexen. I remember talking about Painkiller and Hexen and stuff that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hexen is a little bit more fantasy, I suppose, but yeah.
Right.
I do want to talk about Final Fantasy.
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
that's a game that almost made our list.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm just gonna spoil it. We chose Ni no Kuni 2 over Final Fantasy 15 this time.
Yeah, that's okay.
I feel like it could have gone either way, though. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, I don't know. So,
Right.
What did you like about Final Fantasy, Dalsson?
I just thought the combat system was really good, especially compared to old Final Fantasy games. Like they switched it to a somewhat action-based system. I'd say the closest comparison is something more like Kingdom Hearts than Devil May Cry or anything like that.
I wouldn't even compare it to Kingdom Hearts because Kingdom Hearts is an actual action-based combat system, whereas this is almost more like this might sound weird. It feels like playing like an action strategy game, like Pillars of Eternity even. You kind of you move your dudes over to the enemies and you let them fight, and occasionally you might oh, I need to use an ability here. You know what I mean? They even have that system where if you stop moving, it pauses, which is another thing that you can do in Pillars of Eternity.
Oh yeah, but I never really used that.
I didn't either.
It
but
depends on the. Oh,
yeah.
I'm not sure where you're getting that impression then, because I remember you had to press X on a timer to do your damage efficiently, and then you had to actively dodge. It's not like you just let the guy fight.
No, and that's what was tripping me up, because I was trying to hit X to attack people, when what you need to do is just hold X to let him continue to attack. It wasn't...
Really?
Yeah. That being said, I really did enjoy the combat system, and it was very unique. It was not super similar to anything else, especially from a third-person perspective.
Right.
Especially in comparison to other Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, it was complete. It's totally completely different from stuff like that. I liked Ni no Kuni 2 a little bit more in this regard because it was an actual action-based combat, and I think I just like that personally more.
Right.
But I really, that's actually what kind of drew me into that game so much was the combat system and how interesting and weird it was. That being said, the story was also really interesting, but it's sort of harder to care about Final Fantasy boys. I don't know.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah, Final Fantasy boys aren't.
Unless you think they're cute.
They were cute.
Who doesn't though?
Hey, wait a second. You just said the opposite of the thing you said, Dalsson.
That is a game that I probably will finish and want to come back to, but it's such a long, hard game to really get into. There's a ton of content, but
the boys.
Unless you're really invested in spending time with it, it's hard to go through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I really loved this game, and it felt a little dirty not including it in our top 10 because it barely made it, but at the end of the day we had to choose between one RPG or the other to kind of round out our list, and Ni no Kuni 2 just kind of made it it just felt a little bit more interesting to me. I was a little bit more invested in it when it came out, so
Right, exactly. That makes sense.
Alright, so we've spent about an hour. Do you guys want to go to a break?
Real quick one, if we wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so why don't we come back at, I don't know, 5:10? It's safer to take a 10-minute break, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll be back in a little bit.
Okay, well.
What?
Okay.
Oh, we'll be back in a little bit.
Oh.
Alright, we're back. Okay. So, for the second half of the show, we're going to talk about movies and stuff we checked out this year that we want to talk about that did not make our top lists. So,
speaking of checking out,
yeah.
Oh, Dalsson died. Rest in peace.
Speaking of checking out, bye.
Okay, so the only way we're gonna get through even some of these is we're gonna have to bounce back and forth, though. I think from your list and my list. So why don't you talk about one of yours first?
All right, I'm just gonna go in like chronological order from my top 10 first off. Like I didn't put my top 10 on this list. Like the ones I put out here were like my runners.
Your top 10 runners up.
Yeah, these were my. I'll just start with like my number 10 of the year. You Were Never Really Here. Lynn Ramsey comes back with a fucking action sort of movie. Lynn Ramsey, if you don't know, is the person who directed We Need to Talk About Kevin and has generally been pretty big in the art film scene. And she came out with the movie called You Were Never Really Here. The way that the action is done on this is like almost through like different types of security cameras, which was really interesting. It left a lot up to essentially it left a lot up to interpretation as to what was real and what wasn't real within this person's life. And it was really, really interesting. I kind of love this movie. I'm really happy that Lynn Ramsey is getting into other stuff and that like, you know, she's branching out and that movies are branching out and able to like get something like this out to us. It's my biggest complaint was that it just wasn't fucking long enough. It felt like it was a 2-hour movie edited down to be an hour and a half.
I feel that way about a lot of movies, actually.
Yeah.
There's a lot of movies where it's like, man, if you just spent another 15 minutes, this movie would be a lot better.
Yeah. It was really weird because it's like it felt like there was because like her editing this way was very much a decision, and I'm certain changed the entire movie, because if I remember right, like the original cut was like 4 hours or something. She essentially took she went full fucking Terrence Malick on this bitch and just completely remade what the movie was in editing.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna talk about Upgrade. So Thel's doing all of the actual top 10 stuff for our movie side this year, but Upgrade was my favorite movie this year, mainly because it was just so surprising and weird. Like, yeah. I don't really... I don't know, like, I'm not the biggest fan of, like, horror exactly, and I guess this wasn't exactly horror either, but it was kind of like an action movie with a psychological horror bent to it. Yeah. And it just had some crazy interesting choreography and cinematography in it. They did a really good job of like matching what made or like matching the weirdness of the cinematography with the weirdness in the story. Like, it was a good blend of using the camera to tell a story as much as the story is telling a story. And that was one of my favorite parts of Upgrade.
Yeah. Upgrade was pretty damn good.
It was a movie that felt like it could take place in the same universe as something like what the Ryan Gosling
Drive?
No, another one.
Blade Runner.
Oh,
Blade Runner. Thank you.
Yeah.
It felt like it was a movie that could really take place in the same universe as Blade Runner, like as leading up to some of that, because it just felt like the theme was similar, even if it was toned down on the neon lights. So
yeah, it was definitely a cyberpunk movie, and I was really, really happy about the aspect of that. I thought that like the sort of like close future world was really, really well realized in a way that I sort of thought it was going to be kind of a background thing in this movie, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Right. All right, so why don't we talk about your next video or your next movie?
The next movie I have, I want to preference this. Logically, even though it's usually completely wrong, logically, once your series of movies gets to its 6th installment, you should probably be making one of the best action movies ever, because you've had 5 previous installments to figure it out. For the most part, this is completely wrong, and it is usually trash. For Mission Impossible, however, this movie has been called by many people one of the best action movies ever made, and it is really easy to see why. It takes a much more somber look at the series than the previous ones, to the point where it sort of like does this subversion of expectations. There's this thing in all of the Mission Impossible movies where and in a lot of heist movies in general, where they see like the plan going perfectly before they execute it and show like exactly what it would look like if everything just went completely right. And in this case, it was the villain's plan going completely right, where Tom Cruise sees himself murdering innocent people. I see. It starts off also on a somber note, as Tom Cruise has a dream of his of giving wedding vows to his wife, read by his Moriarty man while a nuclear bomb goes off in the background. All of this story stuff mixed with the multiple fucking like fifth dimension chess levels of twists in this are really great, but that's not what really cements it. What really cements it is just how fucking exciting the action is. Like, god damn, this movie is tense as shit. I've seen this movie like 3 fucking times. Every time I'm on the edge of my seat for every fucking thing that happens. Jesus goddamn Christ. And there are multiple, like, through the action scenes and through a lot of action scenes, there are multiple, like, threads. Sometimes it's like we cut to people fighting. Like, one of the things I think about, like, in Guardians of the Galaxy every time I remember it, it's like, oh yeah, Gamora and the other lady fight at the end of this movie, don't they? That's something that happens. But in this movie, it's like every single one of those is incredibly tense for almost different reasons. Some of them are like massive action shows, and one of them is Benji just needs to not be hanged. It's fucking great. Mission Impossible Fallout is fantastic, and I recommend it to everyone. It's incredible. It's the best Mission Impossible, which is they just keep getting better. Gosh damn, Mission Impossible.
I liked the second one better than the third one, but
I didn't really know much about Mission Impossible. I've never seen a Mission Impossible movie at all. And I was always under the impression that Mission Impossible was the type of movie where, like, the first one was a breakout success, and then every single Mission Impossible after that was a actual literal joke.
Let me explain.
Not really.
What I assume,
I could see how you would think that, but
that's what I assume out of all action movies, right?
Well,
like,
here's the thing.
That's how they usually go.
You were right up until a point. The first one was pretty good and it was the breakout success. The second one was absolutely fucking garbage. The third one was okay. The fourth one had Brad Bird jump on it and it was really good and people are like, wow, this is the best Mission Impossible movie ever. Then the next one came with Christopher McQuarrie, who directed this one, and people were like, wow, this one's slightly even better than the last one. And then this one comes along and it's like, wow, this is one of the best action movies ever made. Holy fuck.
I remember liking the second one better than the third one, but I guess I could be wrong about that. It's been a long time.
Yeah. But yeah. Essentially,
you
if you
see
want
why
to
I would think that, though. Like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Take literally any other action movie, like the Fast and the Furious.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the Fast and the
agree.
Furious is like the one example of like the movies having a fairly consistent quality, but they only appeal to a very specific demographic.
Yeah, that's true. But that's what makes the rest of them a joke.
Yeah.
Like, the rest of them are the same as the first one. So after the first one, the hype died off, and it's just a joke now.
The Mission Impossible movies somehow came along, and if you want to like start on the Mission Impossible movies, I would suggest just start with fucking Ghost Protocol and then go from there. Just watch those 3.
I think they're all worth watching. I think they're all worth watching, honestly.
Okay, that's fair enough. And the truth is, I haven't seen like the first 3 in like a long time.
I would expect them to hold up, but I don't really know. I guess.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the only movie Dalson's seen this year, Avengers.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I like the part where Thor is cool in it.
I like the part when Thor and Rocket Raccoon are hanging out. That part's great.
Pretty good.
Yeah, that was one part of that.
I'm gonna be real. When this movie first came out, I was really cold on it. But I feel like I've sort of changed my tune as more movies have come out this year. What the fuck? Hold on a second.
I feel like you were decently warm on it when it came out. You really liked Thanos as a villain.
I liked Thanos as a villain, but I sort of like attacked everything else about the movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Again, now that more movies has come out, and one of the movies I saw this week was Aquaman, I just kept thinking, that Avengers movie, I've seen that one like 3 times, and every time I sat down to watch it, I was like, I could be doing something else, but I'm really enjoying this. I'm liking watching this fucking movie about these superheroes fighting this Thanos guy.
I think Avengers is one of the few movies to really achieve the feat of having that many characters and it still being really damn coherent.
Absolutely.
I don't think I've seen
and that many supplementary things. Like, if you take it by itself, like, you can still take it by itself, but it's improved by knowing everything about everything, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that very few movies, and you can tell by for instance, how DC has tried to catch up with them. Like, you can see how good of a formula they kind of have going with the Marvel movies. Not formula as in like a cookie cutter thing, but formula as in like you make, you know, a series of movies for this character and a series of movies for this character, and then for a couple of the films you kind of bring them together and have a story that affects the greater universe. And I think that no other movies have been such a good job of like taking such a huge diverse group of characters and making them all have like their moments to shine, even if maybe you could have wanted more Spider-Man, or maybe you could have wanted more, I don't know, Captain America. They were able to still balance it pretty well, and that's like, say what you will about superhero movies, but like this is the only kind of thing that could probably get away with something like this. So
Godzilla.
You know, that's fair. That is fair.
Yeah.
Although in Godzilla they never had like 20 characters all working together at once, but you know,
every time that fucking 3-headed bitch Ghidorah shows the fuck up.
Yeah, where's the movie?
All of the Godzillas gotta work together.
Where's the movie? Where's the movie where 6 kaijus fight a different 6 kaijus?
Yeah, right.
They never had one of those. They had 6 kaijus fighting Ghidorah multiple times, and then like fucking the Heisei series, it was we got to get all these monsters together to fuck on Godzilla.
I know we were bouncing back and forth, but I think it would make sense to get the 2 superheroes movies out of the way together. So let's talk about Black Panther.
Black Panther, really good. I think I still like this movie a little bit more than Infinity War.
I do not blame you. I feel like it's actually one of the better MCU movies in general, which is kind of funny, especially for me, who has not been that big of a fan of Black Panther in general. But I think it just did such a good job of having, like, in the end, a hopeful message, even despite some of the complicated aspects of kind of racial tensions, I guess.
Yeah, and that was another one of the things. I don't know. I don't know if I said this on or off the podcast, but one of the things I feel like filmmakers have been doing this year that I really wanted to say on my video, but I didn't get around to it. It feels like a lot of filmmakers have sort of been coming out of the woodwork trying to do what Spike Lee does, but better, including but not limited to Spike Lee himself. And I feel like this was one of those movies.
Yeah. One of the best things about comic book characters in general is it's really easy for them to have a kind of bigger picture story, or like, you know, an overarching plot that has to do with like villains and heroes and stuff, but also tying in, you know, undercurrents of, you know,
social
messages that reflect reality, not just not just like I don't know, not just like social justice things, or
like, but more like X-Men is specifically about just general like puberty, growing up and feeling like you're being exiled from communities and stuff like that.
Yeah, and just generally discrimination and being outcasts, and like X-Men is so great because it hits on so many different social issues so well. Like, without feeling forced or ham-fisted. I mean, there have been comics that have been ham-fisted, don't get me wrong. But, you know, overall, though, it's just done a good job of tying in so many realistic messages within a framework of people fighting each other in the end, right? Yeah. And that's actually one of the best things about most of these Marvel movies, that have been able to be about something else in addition to what it's about. In the same way, like the Marvel Cinematic TV shows on Netflix have been like, Luke Cage is about racial tensions, and Punisher is about PTSD, and Jessica Jones is also about PTSD and stuff.
Yeah, and they can just do that shit, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. And Black Panther was a really good example of this, with being about racial tension without ending up with the message, well, it sucks, you know? Yeah. Because everybody knows that. It's good to have some hopeful message that we can work towards.
Yeah.
Right.
What was the thing? Oh yeah, another thing I wanted to say about this, specifically about Black Panther. One of the reasons that I feel like it puts it over the top for a lot of Marvel movies for me is one, the cinematography. Ryan Coogler just likes to do fun camera work, and it was really fun to see all of this fun camera work in this movie. And second, the music. This movie had a good ass soundtrack. And that surprised me.
Yeah, I don't really remember the soundtrack, but I saw this movie in February, so
yeah, that's understandable. Yeah, it was to the point where like the one point of Avengers Infinity War where I like was really noticing the soundtrack was oh, we're going to Wakanda now. Hell yeah. That's great. I hear that music. I know right where that music belongs to.
Yeah, I even Avengers Infinity War feels like it came out a long time ago.
Yeah, even though it was just this year.
Yeah.
It's been a really long year.
Like it's gone really fast and really slow at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my number 8 top 10 movie of the year was The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. This is a movie that I absolutely fucking adored. I felt like some of the like it's a movie directed by the Coen brothers, and it's a bunch of stories about the Wild Wild West, all which are completely fucking different from all of the other ones. Some of them are, for instance, the titular Buster Scruggs story is the story about a man who is essentially a Bugs Bunny-ass motherfucker running around brutally murdering people and then singing about it, and it's hilarious. And then you have something like the fucking Stagecoach one, the Oregon Trail one, which is just incredibly depressing.
Yeah.
And
Buster
they all
Scruggs was incredible.
And they all work really, really well. They're all really, really good. All of the gunfights are fucking wonderfully done. The Coen brothers still got that spark. They still got that ability to write a fucking script that is hilarious and depressing and dark, and I wanted to say uplifting, but it's not really. It's essentially the West sucked, but here's some jokes about that.
Yeah.
My favorite fucking story on this was the Prospector story with Mr. Pocket. It's about an old man who goes to find a bunch of gold. And that sounds like it might not be the most interesting story, but gosh darn was it my favorite. It was wonderful.
I don't know what it is about Wild West, but maybe it's because I grew up in the Southwest, but I have such negative interest for any Southwest stories. Like I don't even have any intention to play Red Dead Redemption 2, just because I actively dislike Wild West stories. So that's part of the reason why I'm like super not interested in watching Buster Scruggs, but it's cool that it's so popular because Netflix has kind of needed a movie to be successful on their platform.
Oh yeah, and I'm gonna talk about the fucking next one on my list is the like pinnacle of that.
But why don't we talk about A Quiet Place next?
Okay.
I like A Quiet Place. This is a good horror movie. Fuck yeah. Thanks, Jim from The Office.
I'm so glad that we're having like a renaissance of horror movies.
Yeah, seriously.
Horror movies have been so like samey and boring for so long, like 5 or 10 years or something.
Yeah.
I would go so far as to say 2 to 3 decades.
I don't know that I would go that far, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
there just hasn't been much.
Yeah, it was weird. It was really, really, really weird. If you look back, like there's a point where it's like everyone always is like, "Whoa, what's the best horror movie everywhere?" Fucking Exorcist. It's like The Exorcist was made, and then everyone just fucking gave up after that. Now we're getting lots of really good shit constantly. This is the best year for horror in years.
I mean, if you discount The Exorcist, there's a lot of different options. There's like the Alien series. There's a lot of different things you can go for.
There's Alien. There's fucking like the Kubrick.
Or the Freddy Krueger movies. The Shining is a good one. Like there are part of the problem is when they had a successful horror movie, they then went to milk the shit out of it to make them completely uninteresting. Like you could say, like The Predator is a really good movie. But do you think of the Predator? No, you think of the 4 or 5 Predator movies as a whole and just go, yeah, that series is kind of terrible overall.
Yeah.
And the same thing kind of happens with Alien. You know, the first 2 Aliens are really good, but you know, it gets so mixed up with the other ones. And then you look at the new ones like Covenant, which, while I didn't hate the new Aliens Covenant, was not that great of a movie either. So
right.
And I feel like that was a big 80s thing, like, right? The 60s had like this big new Hollywood renaissance where it was very writer director focused.
Oh, shit.
It's like one man's vision, and then as the 70s came on, it continued to do that, and then the 80s came, and then the studios came back with a vengeance.
You know what one of the
milking stuff.
You know what one of the biggest examples of this is? Fucking Terminator. The first 2 Terminator movies are really fucking good, but you don't think of the first 2 Terminator movies. Maybe you think about Terminator 2, but but like when you look at it as a whole, there's just been so many Terminator movies, and half of them are bad, like super bad. So it's just, to some extent, horror kind of went in 2 directions. Horror went into action horror and Exorcist copies, right? Yeah. Because really, like, you can sum up most modern horror movies that way. Oh, and also zombies, I guess.
Oh yeah, zombies. Yeah. But yeah, there were a ton of them were just like miscellaneously supernatural horror. Like, we want to take The Exorcist and what was that other one? Poltergeist. We want to take those and squish them together and make a movie out of that. This person is possessed and there's spooky shit going on. It's like, oh, they screamed at the screen. That's great. Fuck you.
Yeah. I think like, you know, even something like Paranormal Activity, that movie was interesting the first couple times because it was an interesting way to tell a story, but even then, like, if you boil it down, it's just another possession movie. Like, there's just nothing but possession movies, it felt like, for the longest time, and I was driving myself nuts with it.
Yeah. Quiet Place, however, it's not that at all.
Yeah, A Quiet Place, and last year's the one with Jordan Peele. I'm so bad at names.
Get Out.
Get Out. Yeah, Get Out and A Quiet Place, and even to some extent, like, the latest Halloween movie. Like, there's just been so many better takes on horror movies than there's been in a long-ass time, and it's good that people are actually, like, trying new things with it. And even, like, you could sort of consider Upgrade to be kind of a horror movie. Like, they've done so much better kind of going in weird places with that, rather than just being, like, the next Terminator movie and the next Possession movie. So I'm glad we're finally breaking out of that.
And even, like, even in like Possession movies, Hereditary was sort of that, but it was a much smarter and better take on that than all of the previous kind of trash.
Right.
You know, it's like
and then even like The Witch, which was similar. Like, that was another example of taking a horror movie concept that's been done to death, but doing it in such a polished way that it was just better, you know?
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy. Thank you, horror movies, for coming back. Thank you. That's probably part of A24's big thing, is like one of the reasons that Hollywood in like the last in the 2000s sort of had kind of shitty horror movies is because they were really cheap and they didn't have to think about them, and they could just release them near Halloween and make a fucking buck off of them. It was essentially like, all right, let's just fucking throw this shit out. Now people who have like smaller budgets can be like, I actually give a shit.
It feels like the movie. This is gonna sound kind of funny. This is an interesting observation that I only just now like came up with. But if you look at the video game industry and the movie industry, what happened to video games over the last like 10 to 20 years is, as time's gone on, the number of like AAA titles have reduced in number. Yeah. And then like the weird double A's have kind of disappeared. And so there was this vacuum. There was like nothing but high-end video games. And then the indie scene came and kind of filled out that space. So now you have a range of like pretty cheap indie video games to large AAA titles, and in a lot of ways, indie games are more compelling in a lot of ways. And I feel
Yeah,
like the
because-
same is happening with movies. Like,
Oh yeah.
the number of like kind of B-tier movies has really reduced to like almost nothing. There's only big movies and indie movies, it feels like, for the most part.
And I have a theory about this. What I think it is the theory is my theory is that the reason that this works and is able to happen is just because as time has gone on, internet literacy has continued. Not only is there a really easy way to distribute things like little indie movies and stuff through the internet, and indie games and stuff, there is also a bigger market because more people can hear about it and learn about these specific kinds of games and movies, right? Like, if you had like a company like A24 10 years ago back in the 2000s, it wouldn't fucking go anywhere, and like a very small niche of people would see it. But now those niches are growing because more people are being exposed to that stuff, because exposure in the internet world is so much easier than it's ever been.
Yeah. And actually I read this quote from an article. I know I didn't read the whole article. I read a quote. Yeah. About how, like, even with books, like, people talk about how books are dying and stuff, but this last year,
the literary industry.
Well, no, this last year, there's been more books published than ever before.
Oh yeah.
So, and books actually have gone up in revenue this year. Like, this is the first time that this has happened in a long ass time, because books are coming back too. Because in the same way, there are now indie novelists, and like maybe you don't go to the big maybe you don't go to the big publishing companies, but so many people are able to just self-publish books now because of the internet.
Yeah. It's great. We're living in a golden age of art where you can do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
You don't need to go to a big publishing company to like in order to get the resources you need to bind books and have them sell. Like, you can just bind high quality books if you want.
Yeah, and you don't even need that necessarily. You can just fucking self-publish on Amazon, and it's all digital. You don't need to bind that shit. You essentially need to do one thing, and that's probably hire a guy to make your cover, unless you do it yourself, which some people
don't do it yourself.
Do. Yeah. We didn't talk about A Quiet Place at all.
Quiet Place was really good. I don't know. The whole time,
there's aliens, they hear you, and it's really tense, and they have to use sign language, and that's a really, really interesting concept for a horror movie, for obvious reasons.
And they do a good job of having the monsters be scary without jump scares. Except for that one jump scare, which I didn't hold against it.
Yeah. Like, there are sometimes the jump scares just work, and this movie was incredibly tense throughout. It was wonderful. I love The Quiet Place. Yeah, that was the state of movies, and also A Quiet Place as a side
state
note.
of movies, video games, books, and also like Hereditary and Halloween and The Quiet Place.
Yeah. The next one on my top 10 list after The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, this is my 7th movie, was a movie I haven't talked about on the podcast yet, Roma. This is the big Netflix. This has been a movie that's been very sort of in the news recently because it was a Netflix original movie that was essentially going to be. It was a huge passion project for a really, really outstandingly good director. It was Alfonso Cuarón, the man who did Children of Men and more recently Gravity, and this is his return to Spanish language film. It was a callback to the Italian neorealism era with like actors that didn't know what they would be doing, and I think actually people who weren't actors. Like he hired people off of the street to be these characters, and it is an incredibly touching and really, like, I don't know if touching is actually the right word. It's almost a bittersweet movie. It's a very, like, it's what you take away from it movie. There's a very interesting shot at the very end where the woman is like looking out of a car, and you can see like the cracks of the smile on her face, but also like a good heaping help of sadness. It's a movie about a woman who is excuse me. It is a movie about a woman who is essentially the serving girl for a house. She's the help And it's about her life and accidentally ending up pregnant and how horrible everything essentially is. And not only in her life, but in the life around her. It takes place in Mexico in 1971, and there's this incredibly intense scene dealing with the Corpus Christi massacre of people, of like protesters who are protesting against the Mexican government. And she's just sort of like a side thing from that. And this is another thing that I really, really liked about the movie. A lot of the plot, Saine was talking about like how the sort of visuals go with the plot with Upgrade. That's like this entire movie. Sometimes plot points will literally run past you. Like there'll be a point in time you're sitting there and wondering what the fuck is going on between these two characters and like why the fuck this is all kind of weird, and you'll think it's like this one thing, maybe it's this other, but it's like it's pretty obviously this one thing, and then it'll just happen. It'll just run past you. Like this character will just run past you. You'll be like, was that motherfucking, oh god damn it, that motherfucker, as just like a side thing to this other like to what our main character is doing, like a side thing to what our main character is trying to achieve at that point. And that's the thing. This movie works really, really well in the background as well as the foreground. It uses this character as a great window, not into Alfonso Cuarón's life as a child, but into like sort of how he felt about his nanny. Because you can say whatever you want about all of the other fucking characters in this movie, those kids goddamn loved that woman. Right. Whether or not you felt that she was mistreated horribly by her or generally seen as like a lower tier person by her employers, those kids fucking loved her, and that's the big pull away from this. It's a fucking wonderful multi-level, multi-tiered emotional movie that is I mean, the fact that, I'll put it this way, the fact that Canes didn't take this was they saw this movie, and to say no to this fucking movie, that took some goddamn balls. Like shit. This is a movie that's definitely going up for Oscars, but it doesn't feel like Oscar bait. It feels very, very, very personal. Great on a technical level, great on an emotional level. Roma is fantastic. Netflix is fine. It's got a fucking winner with this one.
Cool.
Anyway.
Yes. Let's talk about
oh, excuse me.
Let's talk about Bad Times at the El Royale for like a second.
Okay.
Royale. So, Bad Times at the El Royale feels like a
Spider-Man.
It makes you feel like Spider-Man. Bad Times at the El Royale. Bad Times at the El Royale feels like a Tarantino movie done by someone else, but better in some ways. Like I don't think if we pretended for a second that this movie was done by Tarantino, I feel like it would have been right up there with Reservoir Dogs as being like that kind of movie, like that quality and that level of movie. But because it's done sort of later in time, it like takes the concepts of how they did those concepts in Reservoir Dogs and kind of made it a little bit more updated and kind of smoother than they did. Yeah. And it's just it just really worked.
Yeah. It's directed by, it's not this man's directorial debut, but it was directed by the man whose last directorial movie was Cabin in the Woods.
That makes a lot of fucking sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really good movie, and I definitely recommend it. It was one of my favorites this year, so. But, do you mind if we jump into Isle of Dogs real quick, too?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We spent, like, no time on that, so yeah, let's just jump into Isle of Dogs.
Yeah. Isle of Dogs, such a good movie because it...
Oh, yeah.
It's like an art piece, and not in like a, oh, this is a dumb art film kind of way. It's an art piece in that you can take a frame from every scene of the movie, and it's so well composed and so, I don't know, like Wes Anderson is just amazing.
Yeah, that's how Wes Anderson does. He makes a very, very colorful, well composed movies where he thinks about every single shot. And he is very, very particular about every single shot. He's essentially like, oh, what is it? He's essentially like the anti-Terrence Malick, where like the entire movie is like freeform jazz and it moves along as it goes. This man has like a plan. This is what he's going to do. The movie is going to look like this. And it's not like he's like not creative or anything. He's very, very creative. All of his movies look like they're really, really interesting and employ a ton of different things. And this one, of course, was entirely stop motion.
Yeah, so this movie, it's like, it tells a really good story. So from the get-go, it's like telling a story that's interesting. But it's shown in such an eclectic way that it's really just interesting to watch. Like, because you never... It's composed in such a... like, I don't want to say obvious and forced way, but it's a very noticeable way. Like, every scene is very noticeably composed exactly the way that I guess Wes Anderson thinks it should be. So it's like, to some extent, it almost takes you out of it, but because the whole movie is like that, instead of pushing you away, it draws you in. It's so weird in the best possible way.
Yeah.
So we did that pretty quick too, but why don't you tell us your next film, Thel?
My number 6 film is First Reformed. This is a movie about a priest who is sort of like on the edges of his faith and then runs into a person who is an incredible, like, he's a super environmental activist to the point where he turns sort of into an eco-terrorist. Because he believes global warming is going to be like incredibly impactful, and he sort of gets into this priest's head, and it's this priest not necessarily having like a falling out of faith, but rather just having this like idea that that like humans are sort of self-destructive, and how that like sort of mixes in with his faith, and he just essentially breaks. This is a movie about global warming, but this is a movie about a man breaking. What I thought it was going to be was, you know, a more faith-based movie, like I talked about when I talked about this on the podcast. And it ended up being a much more, it ended up being a much deeper character study into the psychology of a broken man rather than into the general philosophy of faith, which this is a Paul Schrader movie, and like I said in the fucking when I talked about it before, this is the man who wrote Taxi Driver. I should have expected that. But the cinematography was wonderful. It was beautiful, and it was shot in 4:3, which was a weird choice, but it was a choice that made a lot of sense, seeing as all of the other stuff I said, a 4:3 camera angle sort of gives you a much more close and sort of like constrained look at things, and that worked really well in this movie to sort of tell this man's story, and it was fantastic. Thank you, Paul Schrader. This is great.
All right. I don't have a ton of other ones I want to talk about, but I'm going to talk about my favorite movie this year.
Okay.
That is an upgrade, I guess.
Yeah, it is an upgrade,
Spider-Man Enter the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, I still haven't seen this one yet.
Oh, yeah.
This shouldn't be that surprising for anyone who really knows me, because Spider-Man is one of my favorite superheroes in the first place. And just generally his media I really enjoy. And the Spider-Man video game is on our top 10 video games this year.
Yeah.
Man, Spider-Man Enter the Spider-Verse is like one of those movies that really takes advantage of being an animated movie. In a lot of ways, like some movies are just animated to be animated, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this is a movie that really like does interesting things with its animation that makes it so that you really couldn't do the same movie in a non-animated form. Like everything from like little glitchy things that happen because of story reasons to the kind of interesting clashing of different character styles in the movie. It just, the whole way through, it looks so good. We said that Isle of Dogs, you can kind of take a screenshot of any point and it'll look really interesting. And the same goes for this movie. Like, they did such a good job of making all of the characters look so unique and interesting, and the compositions and shots are really cool, and just the character designs, like everything from the start to finish is just so cool. I love that they focused on Miles Morales. I love that, you know, they brought in other versions of Spider-Man. Like, they just, like, their take on the 616 version of Peter Parker is really funny. It's just, I really love this film because it really speaks to Spider-Man fans. It's like being more than just a superhero movie in general. Like, it does a good job of, you know, hitting on the things that people love about Spider-Man and giving little Easter eggs and little interesting side notes, and like, it's really a love letter to Spider-Man fans in addition to just being a fantastic movie in the first place.
Yeah. Well, there you go. What more could you want?
It's such, like, Thel and I are actually not allowed to talk about Spider-Man films very much because anytime we talk about it, we start arguing about which ones were good and which ones were bad. But I'm positive that as soon as Thel sees this, it'll be easy for us to just up and down agree that this is the best Spider-Man film there's ever been. Because
and I mean, looking at even just like all of the trailers and what I know about the movie's existence, it looks fucking fantastic. Like, I'm super excited to see this movie.
Every other Spider-Man film I've had some problem with. There's been some issue I've had with it. I thought that something they didn't get right with who Spider-Man kind of is as a character. And I feel like even though it focuses, I mean, I want to say it focuses on Miles Morales, but it probably focuses on Miles Morales and the 616 Spider-Man the most. But it just does a good job of capturing who they are as people and just being more than about doing hero stuff. It's more about the psychology of who Spider-Man is as a person. And this movie just does that so well, in addition to just being a good superhero movie in the first place. So I just, like, really love this movie, and I think that it's going to, like, I'm definitely buying the Blu-ray, and this is going to be one of my favorite movies to rewatch over and over again, which for me is like something that almost never happens. So yeah, Spider-Man.
All right, Spider-Man, good.
Yeah.
All right, now I finally get to get into my top 5. The bottom 5 were ones that I was constantly, like, fighting against, like, other movies. Like, I wanted to put First Man up there. I wanted to put Hereditary up there. I wanted to put Won't You Be My Neighbor up there. But I ended up with these ones just because it's like, I just like that just a sliver more. These top 5 ones are really solid. And I'm really only going to talk about 2 of them because, like, the other 3 I made whole-ass videos on. My number 5 movie of the year is Blind Spotting. This movie was fucking incredible. It was a movie that I was going into expecting it to be a horribly depressing movie, and it fucking got there eventually. But it ended up being hilarious and funny and fun to watch. It was a very lyrical movie, from the cinematography to the very literal rap lyrics that essentially compose the entire, like, final part of the movie. There's a great line where it's like, yeah, I really like that line. I really like that. You know, we get money just by moving stuff in this fucking moving truck. And it's just like,
Del, we should watch this movie together, because having heard you talk about it last time, it actually does seem like a movie that I would like to watch. But I might forget about if you don't remind me, because I was like, Blind Spotting, did we talk about that? I don't remember it, but having heard you talk about it even for like a minute now, I've reminded me of,
oh yeah, that one. But yeah, it is a very good social commentary. It's a social commentary on things like gentrification and the general changing of Oakland, it's set in the exact same city as Sorry to Bother You, like my second favorite movie of the year. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting movie. From, like, you look at it from like I'm going to watch this as a piece of entertainment movie, and it works really, really well as that. It can be incredibly tense and incredibly funny, and you can also look at it from I'm going to watch this as like a deeper meaning movie. And then there's all of the stuff with like the art man and all of like the trees. There was a point in time where this was nothing but trees and forests, and how that comes back constantly, and how there are constantly like photographs and images and stuff, and how people's eyes are like the deeper window to that, and all of the stuff that like the characters don't give a shit about, but are always in the foreground that you're looking at. Wonderful, wonderful things. Blind Spotting was fucking fantastic, and I loved it.
Cool.
But yeah.
We're gonna go back to back because there's nothing else I really want to talk about, I think.
All right. The next one is 8th Grade. This is Bo Burnham's directorial debut. I'm really happy about this here because it was a lot of directorial debuts from a lot of people who, what the fuck, this person had a directorial debut this year and it was really good. Jim from The Office, the leader of the band The Coup, and Bo Burnham, a man who I know from his fucking Numbers song that I thought was funny in junior high and is a stand-up comedian. This man, it seemed like when he was making this movie, he saw that one Tumblr post, and I'm almost entirely sure this is what happened. He saw that one Tumblr post that said, if someone made a movie about junior high school that was a real movie about junior high schoolers wouldn't get to go see it because it would be rated R. And he took that real movie about junior high school as fucking literally as he could and made this movie incredibly real. This is one of the tensest, most horrifyingly uncomfortable movies I have ever seen. I watched this the first day of Halloween, and I thought, well, it's silly to watch this instead of like a horror movie, but fuck it, here it is. Let's give it a shot. And I did not regret it one bit. Christ. This movie, even just like in like the little like there were little bits of this movie, just constantly this feeling of like overwhelming dread and just like anxiety just shrouds over this movie, like the social anxiety that the main character is feeling. And then there's just like a specific scene. Oh, excuse me, I'm sort of running low. My mouth is getting a little bit dry. A very specific scene near the end of the movie that just is almost a legitimate horror scene. It is fucked up and horrible to watch, and it's like one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, no, legitimate trigger warning though. Some fucked up shit happens in this movie. Like I said when I was talking about it previously on the podcast, it's like, well, you know what would be fucked up? If this movie did this, haha, that would be messed up. Oh no, the movie is doing it. No, please stop.
I feel like if I watch this, I'd compare it to my own 8th grade experience and be like, wow, my 8th grade experience was super boring and it's nothing like this. Because
yeah.
My 8th grade, I hung out and played D&D in the back room at lunch, and we played Magic the Gathering, and I played Diablo 2 with my friends, and like we played video games, and that was kind of it.
Yeah. And this poor girl has a problem making friends, so she tries to make friends with the most popular girls in school, and as cliched as this is, it is not executed in a cliched way. It's executed like it was a fucking horror movie.
Right.
Is it like the epitome of like that nightmare where you wake up and you don't have like you're in class and you're naked or something?
Entire movie.
It's basically that. Okay.
Straight up, that's this entire movie. But it ends on such a high and happy collection of notes. You will leave this movie with a smile, even though for the entirety of the movie you'll feel like shit. The ending is wonderful. It's very, very simple, and the final scene of this movie is the best scene that Rick and/or Morty has ever been a part of in any way, shape, or form. It's great. It's great. I love watching those two kids just do like their Rick and Morty impressions and just being friends. It was just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Bo Burnham, holy fuck. I didn't know you could make good movies, but you apparently can. Shit.
Right.
Cool.
Huh.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is we need more singing comedians to do movies. Like, is the next one going to be Stephen Lynch? Is that the plan here?
Yeah, that seems like.
But here's another thing. Instead of talking about my top 3, which I talked about in like whole videos, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk. Why does it keep doing that? My thing keeps pressing the back button on itself. Is I'm going to talk about a movie that is the unequivocally the worst movie I saw this year. Gotti. Oh fucking boy.
Oh yeah.
There were a lot of movies this year where I was like, okay, this is just
Is that how you spell
Hollywood.
it? I forget how to spell it.
Yeah, Gotti.
Gotti. Okay.
Yeah.
I added an E there, but
yeah. There were a lot of movies this year where I was like, okay, this is kind of Hollywood. This is another Hollywood movie where they're making this just like that. But Gotti, oh boy.
I feel so bad for you, Dalsson. You're like sleeping in your chair.
Yeah, he's like okay, movies are happening.
Why don't you list your top 3? We have videos coming out about them, but why don't you at least say what they are?
Out about them.
Yeah. My top 3 are Mandy, Sorry to Bother You, and my number 1 movie of this year was Annihilation.
All right.
But yeah.
Annihilation would probably be in my top 10 somewhere, probably towards the top, but it wasn't my favorite.
Right.
I liked
Sorry to Bother You and Annihilation are definitely in my top 10 because they're one of the 8 movies that I've watched this year.
Yeah. Anytime I see Annihilation, it makes me think of the one with the language one.
Oh, Arrival.
Arrival.
It makes me think of Arrival, and it makes me think I liked Arrival better. Is kind of how Annihilation kind of is in my brain for some reason.
Yeah.
So
that's understandable.
I mean, they were both really good.
No, yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's bad. It's just, and I'm not even saying one is better or worse than the other. I'm just saying I liked Arrival better. So
yeah. And for me, it's a little bit of a toss-up because one of the things I really liked about Annihilation was just the horror elements that were in there too. Just like I talked about it a long time in the video. Alex Garland takes a lot of obvious inspiration from a lot of different places. Specifically, Panos Cosmatos, who released my number 3 movie of the year this year. He took a lot of inspiration from Beyond the Black Rainbow for this movie and also for his previous movie, Ex Machina. A lot of like Soviet horror, Soviet sci-fi that's really slow moving and stuff. This
might be a controversial opinion about the movie, but I think the end kind of lost me.
Really?
Yeah, I think most people are probably opposite on this, but I thought that I was really with the movie up until the end, but when it's just sort of doing this weird kind of existential alien kind of thing, I was just kind of like, So I don't know. I think that was my hang up with it.
Right.
And I understand why people liked that. It's just for me, I feel like I have watched other movies that I thought did stuff like that better. So stuff like 2001: A Space Odyssey, like I don't know, or not that one, but the one after it. Well, kind of both of them. 2001 and 2011 or 20 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's hard not to compare them, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And one of the things a lot of people were comparing this to was a sci-fi movie that came out really recently and was generally lauded as the best sci-fi movie in the last 20 years when it came out, Under the Skin, which was that Scarlett Johansson movie a lot of people watched because she took off her top.
I don't think I ever saw that one.
It's essentially it's one of the movies that I like to talk about when I mention visual storytelling in movies rather than storytelling through dialogue, because you could take any of like the 5 lines in that movie, take them out of the movie, and it wouldn't change a bit. It is told purely through the visuals, and the visuals are gorgeous and wonderful to look at. It is a wonderful piece of cinema. But yeah.
I'm one of those people who really like telling stories through dialogue because I find it interesting. Not exposition, but like one of the things I like is about Tarantino movies is how they kind of are talking about stuff that are either relevant but you don't know it's relevant yet, or completely just random shit. So I don't know. That's all fun.
Yeah. And that is one of the big things about Tarantino is
I think they
dialogue.
So visual to storytelling is like king, I acknowledge, but I think that there is a lot that you can get through dialogue that is just interesting in a way that other things can't match.
Especially if you do like dialogue like Tarantino does, and just have it flow in a really not only interesting but in a really natural way.
Exactly.
Really, really good. Yeah. Anyway, Gotti. Imagine if someone watched fucking Goodfellas once and decided to make a movie.
I could do that.
Yeah, and was like, I could do that. There were scenes that didn't go anywhere and were never brought up again.
Was this a wide release film, or was this just some random shit that came out?
This was a wide release film. I'm pretty sure it was an Amazon picture, but this bitch was in fucking theaters.
Weird.
Yeah, and it's so weird. It had John Travolta fucking starring in this bitch. Like, I am surprised this movie got such a wide release. It was very, very bad, but I have to recommend it to everyone. Because this is, I feel like this is a great example of a so bad it's good movie, because this man tried to make a good movie about how he thought John Gotti was a stand-up guy, and he fucked up everything so bad that it's just baffling. You sit there thinking,
so it's like The Room, basically, is what you're telling me.
It's essentially, yeah. It's like the biggest budget The Room that I can think of. It's like fucking a talking cat. You're just sitting there wondering, what the fuck was this guy thinking when he did this shit? What does this have to do with it? Oh, it has nothing to do with anything. Okay, all right, understandable. Why the fuck was that in there though? What?
It's like bashing someone over the head with Chekhov's gun, right? It's like, this is what you should be doing right now. What are you doing?
Yeah, essentially, there was a giant rifle rack that was shown, and then aliens came. Anyway, back in the city. Wait, what was that about the aliens? Oh, it's nothing. It's not important. Just it's whatever. Fuck the aliens. Anyway.
You know, Chekhov's gun as a concept.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand that advice. For people who don't know, Chekhov's gun is the idea that everything that is shown in something should be advance the plot in some way. Like, if you have a gun in the film, it should be shot, is essentially the idea.
Yeah, if you describe a gun in your story that's hanging on the wall, by the fourth act, someone should use that gun to shoot someone. Yeah.
Right. And I don't necessarily think that Chekhov's gun is something you should 100% abide to. Like, you can have little side shit that doesn't really affect things if you want. Yeah. But it should serve some purpose. You know, even if the purpose is to be funny or be interesting, like, it needs to do something, right?
Yeah, right. And then this had entire scenes where they talked about specific things that could have been plot points. Like, there was this scene where John Gotti is like complaining about this guy who was like working under him and how he was doing a bad job at something. Someone comes up to him and tells John Gotti that like that he knew his dad and that his dad's like shop wasn't doing so good. And John was like, all right, you know, I'm gonna give your shop something. We don't know either of these characters. And he goes back into his rant about how this guy was sort of fucking him over. That scene is completely over. We don't know who the guy who was fucking him over was, essentially why the guy was fucking him over, or any backstory about that. And then the shop thing just sort of goes the fuck away. The scene ends, and the rest of the story has nothing to do with any of the stuff that was in that scene, and it's never brought up again. And it's crazy. God damn, is Gotti a fucking piece of shit? Everyone should see this garbage.
Okay, now that we're done talking about Gotti, is there anything else you would like to talk about, Dalsson, since you have not been able to speak in, like, the last 20 minutes?
Yeah. No, not really.
Okay, cool. So, I guess we're gonna wrap up then.
Yeah. One thing I do want to do some shout-outs to First Man and Bird Boy, which didn't make my list, but we're really close.
Didn't Bird Boy come out, like, 6 years ago?
Nah, Bird Boy came out this year.
No, Bird Boy is... Yeah, no, you're thinking of...
What am I thinking of?
Birdman.
Oh, Birdman.
I would see why you would confuse them.
Entirely
different things. Not even remotely similar.
Yeah, not even close.
Very similar titles.
That's really funny. Yeah. So, okay, what videos have come out this week, Thel, that you have done? Or are in the process?
Came out this week were and they've all come out now. The fucking top 3 movies of the year. I made one video on Mandy and Sorry to Bother You, and then a full video on Annihilation, because I talked about the bear scene for 5 minutes and didn't want to put out a 15-minute movie or video.
Yeah, fair enough. So make sure to check those out. I've not had a chance to watch them yet, but
yeah,
they're probably good, I assume.
Yeah,
I would say all of our content is amazing and perfect, and you should never
assume otherwise.
Say anything bad about it, especially when we take 3 takes to actually get our podcast up.
Yeah.
To be fair, that's the first time that's ever happened. So
yeah, that's crazy.
That's probably the biggest technical difficulty we've ever had. Oh, except people like dropping out and stuff in the middle, but you know.
Yeah, well, that happened this one too. I think we dropped out a little bit,
and some of the audio is kind of bad in some of our earlier ones too. But like that's whatever.
It's what can you do?
But I forgot. I totally lost my train of thought. But we have a top 10 video games of the year list that we want to put out by Friday.
Yeah.
If that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
So make sure to look out for that.
Yes.
This podcast, I don't know if you're watching it on the recording, but if you're watching it live, it should come out on Wednesday.
Yes.
And that's it.
Yeah.
All right.
We should be back next week. I know that we weren't here last week, but it was Christmas, so, you know.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
definitely we're not going to podcast on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
We will on New Year's Eve, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually don't have work tomorrow, which I totally forgot about, which is cool.
That is cool.
So, make sure you check out those videos. We will see you guys later. Dalsson, is anything been resolved about your streaming schedule, or we still...
No.
Okay,
no.
that's all up in the air, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, just up in the air.
Maybe someday we'll stream randomly. You should keep an eye out for it, I guess.
Yeah, just follow me on Twitch and get the notification, or join our Discord. You can always look and see if I'm streaming, which I probably won't be 95% of the time.
Yeah, please join our Discord, because we try to stay as active as possible in it, and we do have a number of people who do seem to hang out and chat
actually,
a lot. So
it turned into a nice little community, which is great.
Yeah.
And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, which we have not asked you to do for like 2 months, so
yeah,
do that.
Yeah, do that.
Okay, we'll see you guys next time, and remember, as always,
stay beautiful.